Good to meet you, Neil. Thanks
Yeah,
for doing this. I appreciate it.
no problem.
Nice setup in the background.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
we
Cool.
actually met I think back on for a screening at for Matrix Resurrections. I think we were both sitting
Oh
on
no. Well, I'm sorry for that. On behalf of Warner Brothers, I am sorry that movie was ever made.
Hey, at least it brought us together and I got to meet a person
There you
that
go.
I'm interviewing now. So
That's cool. That's awesome. Cool.
yeah, I mean, just to start off, just to just really show that I have a love and appreciation for Attack of the Show and G4,
Oh,
just like
thanks.
you certainly do. If it's not obvious, G4 had played a major role in my life to the point that I decided to start a site called Dorkaholics to share my love of pop culture.
Love the name, Dorkaholics. You're
Thank you.
my people.
Mhm. In your own words, because I know this is kind of an obvious question, where did the passion for this love letter to G4 and Attack the Show come from for you as well as the people involved with the production of Attack of the Doc?
Well, I really appreciate that you described it as a love letter because that was the intention the whole time was to do a love letter to not just Attack of the Show and G4 TV, but that era where, we just celebrated all the things we loved in nerd culture. And what inspired me really to do it was, uh, just being asked the question constantly because I go to a lot of Comic Cons. Still, I was going to Comic Cons before Attack of the Show, and I've been going to Comic Cons after Attack of the Show. And I was always asked, whatever happened to G4 TV and Attack of the Show? And I wanted to answer that question. So in 2017, I was at South by Southwest and I actually registered Attack of the Doc, DOC.com. Thought, well, someone should make a documentary about this. And then I thought, I'll make the documentary. So I grabbed all the social handles of the name because the name kind of popped into my head. And I thought, well, I'm going to make a documentary eventually about this. And did a Kickstarter that the first one failed and the second one was successful. And just as we started shooting, it was March of 2020, the pandemic happened, was kind of like that was one of two major setbacks, including the relaunch of G4. But really what I wanted to do was remind people of geek culture at the time, to give a little bit of pop culture history. And G4 launched on April 24th, 2002 is when the network originally launched, with like 2 weeks of Pong just being played on a video screen, which is really weird. It just was, if you flip through cable, you would happen upon this network like a weird screensaver type of thing. But it's really like a window into an era and like a love for that. I mean, I think we're kind of spoiled today. Um, Not only in my wildest imagination did I not believe I'd ever see an Ant-Man movie. There are 3 Ant-Man movies. I mean, you can debate about which one is better than the other, but there are 3 Ant-Man movies. How cool is that? So I wanted to remind people of a time when, tech stuff was not as like, prevalent, like, you know, uh, comic book movies, they hadn't quite figured it out yet. It wasn't until like 2005 with Batman Begins that I thought, oh, wow, comic book movies are much more serious. And then was it 2008 Iron Man came out? Like nerd culture kind of rose at the same time as the popularity of G4 TV and Attack of the Show. So um, I just wanted to capture that era, do like a greatest hits, remind people of why G4 and Attack of the Show is so beloved, and just give you like a little taste of that time period.
Mhm. No, that definitely shines through. One of my favorite talking points made during the documentary was that it takes you back to the time where fandom wasn't as divisive, to where in a sense it was like nerds were just happy just to have like some form of content out there to just like latch onto.
Right.
But nowadays it's like, oh, DC or Marvel, and that conversation has always been there, but it used to be a lot more welcoming, I guess. It was more fun just to argue Batman or Iron Man. But nowadays it's like the Batman movie sucked. Like, no, Ant-Man sucks.
Well, I mean, to me, like I always have loved the debate. I mean, your opinion is your opinion. So I don't think I've ever gone to a comic book store and just bought a comic book. I'm in the comic book store to find other nerds to debate with, because you can't say this person is right and this person is wrong. You can present evidence. Whoever is the best debater and sort of brings up the best arguments, I love to hear the debate. I love to be challenged. Which is the best Dune book and why? Who is stronger, Thor or the Hulk? That debate will never go away. And I love the debate. I love the discussion. So I like to participate in that. And I think that nerd culture is just a conversation that will never end. Where it's gotten weird lately is where someone has an opinion that differs from you, and you don't like that person because of their opinion. And I have never been that way. You can always find some points of connection. At some point you're going to say, well, we connect on this, but I don't mind that. I don't dislike someone because somehow they point out a flaw in a movie or they didn't like this thing. It's like, well, that's their opinion. I'm comfortable with mine. My opinion doesn't invalidate yours.
No, I think that's the healthiest form of a fandom, and hopefully it becomes more mainstream or widely adopted once again.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that on the journey to getting Attack of the Doc made, there was a few hiccups. I'm curious what happened with the first Kickstarter campaign, as well as any effect that the relaunch of G4 had on Attack of the Doc.
Well, the first Kickstarter, here's my advice to anyone who wants to do a crowdfunding campaign to succeed. You should fail first. There's a really good reason for that. By failing, you learn, what do people want? Why did your campaign not succeed? I think the reason it didn't succeed the first time is I was asking for too much money. The rewards were not that great. And I needed more compelling marketing material. So I looked at I shut it down before it ended. It's like, okay, it failed, but I had all the email addresses of everyone, who contributed, who really wanted to see it, even though it didn't succeed. So what I did was I used the failed campaign to relaunch the campaign one year later with better graphics, better rewards. We set a very low amount of money to fund. And I learned a lot. In fact, if you go to filmthreat.com, Filmthreat is my website, and you click on contact, ask me to send you this crowdfunding document. A buddy of mine who had done the same thing that happened to him. He had a failed one, then he did a successful one. He wrote an essay about what succeeded. So he wrote an essay about, how to do a successful crowdfund. And I will email that to you, because if you email through that, it goes directly to me. But it was a learning experience. And I learned one of the things you have to do. You can run all the advertising, you can post on social media, unless you directly ask someone, will you contribute to my Kickstarter? And they can say yes or no, they're not going to contribute. But it's also really uncomfortable for me, and I think a lot of people, because the three hardest things in life are to say. Three hardest things to say in life: I'm sorry, I love you, I need help. And when you're doing a crowdfund, you're asking for help. So it's like you're asking, how much money do you like me? So it's weird, it's weird in that way. And so I was uncomfortable, and finally I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to directly ask people. So I would direct message people on Twitter every day and say, would you please contribute? And I wrote kind of a funny little message, and I would respond to every message. No matter what, I would respond. And I would also thank every person. After they contributed, I would direct message them and thank them, which ended up being 1,100 contributors to our Kickstarter. And I feel a tremendous obligation to follow through on the promise. Now, we took about twice as long as we originally planned. The documentary took about 3.5 years. It probably should have taken less than 2 years, but we wanted to do it, legally in the clear, wanted to make sure that, we dotted our I's and crossed our T's, wanted to make sure that, we made the best film possible. And then we wanted to be able to release it. So not just giving it to our Kickstarter backers earlier, but also make it possible for anyone who wanted to see it to rent it and buy it for a reasonable price, as you would any movie that you want to see. So it was a long road, and a crowdfund is, I mean, it's a 24/7 job, so buckle up. And I didn't realize how emotionally draining doing a Kickstarter was, because you are asking people to help you. And that's kind of uncomfortable for me. I don't want to ask anyone for help. I don't need anybody's help. But the way I looked at it is, hey, you can pre-order this movie. Just give me a couple years to make it. It took a little longer, but between the pandemic and G4 coming back, those were two huge wrenches thrown at us that changed how we made the movie. So we had to deal with that, and we just pivoted to a different strategy. And we started shooting in March of 2020. We did one interview with a guy named Frank Myers. We had other interviews scheduled. And then what happened in March of 2020? Boom, the pandemic happened. Suddenly it's like all over. You can't avoid it. It changed all of our lives. And one of the guys on the movie, one of our primary, my partner in the film, producer and editor, Bobby Schwartz, got COVID. He was sick for months after. It affected him. Like, he had it for a long time. He had the long version of it. I never got sick, so I felt very fortunate, but it affected everything. So we just had to make the movie in a different way. And, I think the method that we chose, ended up being better in the long run, because it's like a period documentary. It's an archival doc that kind of puts you in the period of time. And through that, you kind of get the feeling, and it's like a greatest hits. So I hope people like it. I hope they're reminded of that period, and recognize that it is, at the end, a love letter to G4 TV and Attack of the Show.
No, I love the storytelling tools you use from the part 1, part 2, part 3, as well as the 3D renderings of events that happened in the past that there was no footage for. Could you explain that creative decision to utilize 3D renderings?
Yeah, well, first, we actually, during the pandemic, when we couldn't even get together in person, I thought, okay, we're going to still work on the doc, but we're going to compile a library. We sought out through YouTube, through my hard drive, through other people's hard drives, Zach Selwyn, other people contributing photos. We built the ultimate database of everything related to Attack of the Show. We had the best of Candace Bailey, the best of Laura Foy, the best of Kevin Pereira, the best of Olivia Munn. All of that was we created a library, hundreds of hours of footage. If something happened on the show, it was cataloged so we could find it quickly. That took a year to build that library. But just getting that going, was a challenge in and of itself. But then as we looked, there were certain things I wrote at the script, and I'm like, well, we're going to tell this story about how Attack of the Show was named Attack of the Show, but there's no footage of that. No footage existed. And I'd been working with Second Life on doing events. We actually built a Film Threat movie theater in Second Life that you can go to, that we've used to do, I interview filmmakers there. It's really fun. And so I talked to the guys at Second Life. I'm like, hey, and Second Life, by the way, was the first metaverse in the early 2000s, right around the time that Attack of the Show happened. So it's very much in the tone of stuff that would happen on Attack of the Show. So I said, hey, could you build the set of Attack of the Show in Second Life, so where we can recreate certain things that happened where we just don't have footage for it? And they're like, oh yeah, we could totally do that. And I'm like, all right, let's do that. How about this? Can you do this? So we had there's maybe 5 minutes of scenes where we didn't have supporting footage, and thought, well, let's just do it in Second Life. And one of the things, I'll let you in on a secret, when the Blu-ray comes out in July, there's going to be an Easter egg on there where you can go into Second Life, and you can visit a digital version of the Attack of the Show set, accurately recreated in Second Life. You can stand behind the podium that Kevin and Olivia stood behind. You can walk around the set. It's totally recreated, and you have to have the Blu-ray to get the link to go to Second Life and be able to check out that experience. So I'm really excited about it. But the Second Life people were incredible at creating all of these different characters. They're kind of loosely based on people who were, behind the scenes. And I'm in there. I think my hair gives me away, but it was just a fun, different way. You know, I thought we want to do animation, but like it's got to be in the style that feels G4. It's got to feel like Attack of the Show. So what better than like the first metaverse where, you know, you create an avatar of yourself and go in that world. And then we just had fun with it. It's weird. I know it's weird. It's a weird choice, but it's just a different way to tell those pieces of the story where we didn't have footage to show.
No, I greatly appreciated it, and I feel so dumb that I didn't realize it was Second Life. I just thought like, wow, this is like really like attention grabbing animation. It feels familiar yet kind of dated. And I was like, oh, it's Second Life.
Yeah,
Ah,
well, it's like machinima. It's dated by design.
mm,
It's dated to take you because I wanted when you watch the movie and you notice like there's like these clips at the beginning of the film that kind of like are like the late 90s, early 2000s, just to sort of bring you to like what was it like back then? You know, what was the coolest new phone? What was the coolest new video game? What was the coolest new comic book or whatever? And the little month, it's short, but it just sort of like takes you like, I'm taking you back in time, right? To this early 2000s, which I think is going to be it's going to be an era for a lot of movies now. There's a movie that's coming out soon called Blackberry, which I've seen, which is really good. And I Glenn Howerton it is so good. It's just a really fun movie about the making of the BlackBerry. It was all designed by Canadian engineers, the best engineers in Canada. It's so fun. And it's just weird that, like, yeah, 20 years ago is an era. It is a different period of time and a very, very different world. So I wanted to take you back, and the sort of dated metaverse was all on purpose.
mm. Was there anything that you wish was included that didn't make it into the final cut of this doc?
So much stuff. It's my goal was always 90 minutes. We're not going to be over 90 minutes. It's going to be a tight 90-minute movie because I feel like you really, if you're going to have a documentary that's a pop culture concept, I think you really have to earn north of 90 minutes. And I thought, you know, there's going to be a Blu-ray, so there's going to be extra stuff on the Blu-ray. I can live with that. There were a couple of segments with me that would be cool, but I didn't. This movie's not my story. I'm your gateway in the story, and I kind of bring you out of the story. But movie's not about me. It's about the fans. It's about the show, and it's about the people that behind the scenes who made the show. But I had this, you know, this thing that Michael Moore has said it, when in doubt, cut me out. So I was in the doc a little bit more, you know, in earlier cuts. And there were other segments that, God, I really wanted to like get in there. I wanted to have more of the breaking news stuff that like G4, as much as like we feature a lot of the jackassery of Attack of the Show with crazy stuff going on, there were really serious conversations that were had on the show about tech, about media, and Kevin led a lot of those conversations. I wish we had leaned, you know, I wish we had showed more of that, but and there were cuts of the movie that were over 2 hours, but it dragged. You know, it really was like, we got to focus on the greatest hits. Those clips are all on YouTube for the most part. A lot of clips. I mean, there is a whole G4 archive, and there's a whole G4 Reddit, and you can find all that stuff. This is like a greatest hits with a little bit of thematic stuff that's not too lectury, that is just gonna make you think if you're looking for it, and also you don't have to think at all. You can just enjoy it. But yeah, I think that I would have liked to have included more of the segments where the show got Attack of the Show did get serious at times.
Mm.
And I think I kind of miss keeping that in there. There are a few serious moments in the doc, but I wanted to keep it light and fun and entertaining, especially for there are people who've never heard of it. There's a whole generation of kids who've never seen it. And now they have the opportunity to experience the entire history in under 90 minutes. I wanted to have like a TikTok-like attention span for anyone who's watching it, so they could get through it. So there you are.
And then for my last question,
Uh-huh.
um, what was the North Star in determining what would be in Attack of the Duck, as well as how did that North Star shift? Because I know you previously mentioned that the version that we see now isn't the what was in the original roadmap for the film.
Well, I think, look, the North Star for me originally was interviewing Kevin and Olivia for the doc. And unfortunately, I reached out to Kevin several times. I think that Olivia is at a level she probably doesn't want to talk about it. So I thought, well, I'll start small. So the North Star was eventually to interview them. As we were making the doc, I realized that I actually didn't need to. From this standpoint, they've appeared on podcasts, and it's in there. They've appeared on podcasts and other TV shows. They've kind of said everything that they've wanted to say publicly about it. And I think that anything else that they would want to say about Attack of the Show is kind of their story to tell. I wanted to take this as like a love letter made by fans for fans. And as I realized, and as I was interviewing like the two directors who combined, Genji Keen and Alan Wu directed over 1,000 episodes of the show, the head writer, Casey Schreiner, the head of the network at the time, John Ryber, like I was hearing stories I'd never heard before. Whereas I heard Kevin on podcasts talk about a lot of stuff. And I thought, well, that's his story to tell. And I'm making this for the fans. Let's share with them stories they'd never hear. Let's talk about the people behind the scenes. Let's focus on that. And maybe there'll be another documentary. Kevin could make his own documentary. He can make it from his point of view. And this was really for the fans. So it originally started like, hey, we're going to interview them. Then I thought, well, that's not going to happen. We got to pivot. We're going to make an archival doc, and we're going to interview people that aren't celebrities. They're not stars you would recognize, and they'll be off camera. So you'll hear their disembodied voices. You do see photos of some of the people, but it's a different style that was by necessity, but actually ended up, I think, being a strength in the long run. But it's, when you're making a doc, or you're making a doc like that, you have to pivot. The story will take you one way and then you go another direction. So while there was this scriptment that I had, and in it was always like, we're going to use animation to tell certain parts of the story. I just didn't know how. And then we're going to have this Greek chorus of Zach Selwyn. That was always in every version of the script, was going to be like, Zach Selwyn's going to tell you the story of Kevin leaving the show in 20 seconds, so that was always there. But we did pivot, based on where we were led. And I hope people, in spite of that, because I think that that's a criticism that people will bring up. I think that the way it turned out is a solid telling. And as you noticed at the beginning of the interview, it's a love letter to the show.
No, I can't praise this documentary enough. So thank you so much, Chris, for not only your time today on this interview, but also making Attack of the Doc.
Well, thanks, Neil, for having me on your show. I appreciate it. You can go to attackofthedoc.com, follow Attack of the Doc on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, find out where to get it on video on demand. And thanks again for having me on the show.